Morning. So I saw a video, and I'll link it in the description, of a shooting. It was pretty recent, I guess, down in Houston at a mall. From what I'm remembering, I think an officer actually died on this call. Subject had a knife and was in the mall stabbing people, I guess. And you can see on the body cam just the officers show up and get involved in the shooting. I think it's really, graphic, so, be warned, but really an important video for the general public to see. The reason for that is some of the questions and concerns people have about the use of lethal force when it comes to police. And oftentimes, in any shooting, you have these questions about, why did the officer shoot so much, or couldn't they shoot them in the leg, or, even, silly enough, shoot the weapon out of their hand, or any of these things. And when you watch this video, I think the answer to a lot of these questions becomes clear. And so what you have is, multiple officers making contact with this violent suspect who's already stabbed somebody, again, from what I'm remembering. I could be wrong about this. Doesn't say anything, has a weapon in his hand, and is aggressing, that is moving purposefully towards the officers, plural, who have responded to the scene, weapon in hand, right? And they give him all sorts of commands, drop the weapon, put the weapon down, drop the knife, whatever. And eventually gets close enough to where they are now backpedaling, retreating, trying to create distance, and feel compelled to fire, right? And in pretty short order, a number of rounds get loosed, right? And so the first thing here is, if you have even 2 or 3 officers, right? And the way we train, we don't just press the trigger, stop, assess, see how that worked, press the trigger again, right? Usually it's multiple round bursts that get fired until the threat is taken care of, right? So, fire till he goes to the ground, which is what happens. And when you factor in things like the time it takes to perceive, like we talk about OODA loop, or observe, orient, decide, act, the amount of time it takes to go through that process, to see something, to orient yourself, that means, actually comprehend what is occurring, make a decision like stop shooting, and then that message to travel from your brain to your finger, who's already got maybe a queue of press trigger commands built up, right? It actually takes a measurable amount of time for that reaction to occur, for you to see a threat, fire rounds, observe that they were successful, decide to stop firing rounds, and then act accordingly, right? But what is especially poignant about this case is just that the casual manner in which the suspect gets up and walks away after having been shot multiple times. And you can see he's been shot because there is blood on the ground, blood on the suspect, and he just gets up, turns around, walks away like nothing happened. And it is bizarre to watch, and really like kind of like Walking Dead kind of, like zombies roam the earth, and maybe, figurative zombies, but like, I don't know what was going on with this guy, whether it was drugs on board, or, some sort of mental health crisis, or combination of the two, or something. I don't know, and maybe it's worth looking into. It's just I saw this video and I'm reacting to it. But yeah, so they loose a number of rounds. The suspect goes down, is on the ground for a second, and they're giving additional commands, once they finally reacted to him falling. Like, one of them kicks the knife away, which, we talk about the tactics of that. It's not something we really do. But the suspect gets back up, turns around and walks away, right? Crazy. Watch the video. and then they're continuing to, guns out, because this person still had just stabbed someone, just had a weapon, maybe he's got another, we don't know, give commands, weapons drawn, as he's walking away, sort of going everywhere in the process, and then another officer actually ends up deploying a taser after this person has been shot, gets up, walks away, before they finally get him into custody. I don't know whether the suspect survived or not. Just given the fact that they're in Houston and, the survival rate on gunshot wounds, there's a good chance he did. I don't know. Like I said, I saw this and I'm reacting to it. But that is another reason when people ask, why did they fire so many rounds? Well, just because you hit somebody with bullets, right, doesn't mean that the threat has dissipated, right? And bullets are not magic. People don't go flying backwards when they get shot, right? Physics still applies. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? You have a very small mass in a 139 grain bullet or whatever you're firing, versus a couple 100-pound adult, right? The recoil, right? For every action there's a equal and opposite reaction. The recoil of a gun that shoots a bullet that's able to knock somebody down, right, make them fly backwards like in the movie, would have the equal and opposite reaction of knocking the officer who's firing that gun to the ground, right? I mean, it would be something like a bigger than a bazooka, right? Some sort of giant cannon that you're trying to shoulder and fire. And even then, you have recoilless rifles. Anyway, I digress. So you're not going to send people flying backwards, right? These are small projectiles which do create, the potential for serious and immediate lethal damage, but human bodies are actually fairly resilient. And like I said, the survival rate, and feel free to fact check me on this, but the survival rate on gunshot wounds in the U.S. is like somewhere in the mid 80% range. And so just because you have shot somebody does not mean they're A, going to die, or B, discontinue being a threat, right? Even if you shot them multiple times. And now your odds of success are going to increase by sending more rounds downrange. But again, as we see in this video, the fact that this guy was shot multiple times in very short order did not stop him from just standing up and walking away in kind of like just some surreal fashion. And also kind of lends itself to explaining why do they not, aim for the leg, right? If you're shooting rounds relatively center mass, which, based on the video, it looks like that's where they're hitting, and it's not stopping the threat, if you're aiming for maybe a less lethal area, are you going to get a better result? Probably not. Now, there's also some argument to be made about whether shooting for the leg is actually a less lethal area. You can die just as quickly hitting somebody in the pelvic girdle, the inner thigh, if you clip their femoral artery, right? You're going to bleed out very, very quickly if you hit a major artery. But also, the leg is a smaller target, right? And it's moving certainly much more than maybe your torso would be moving. So accuracy goes to crap fairly quickly under stress when you've got, maybe somebody like a lethal threat coming at you with a knife. So, if you're trying to hit this person in the leg in a mall, right, in the third or fourth largest urban center in the country, right, you are accountable for those rounds going down range, right? If you miss this guy because you're trying to clip him in the knee from, 10, 20 yards away, you own that round. And to train to a level to where you could reliably hit somebody, it's not feasible when you've got, 750,000 cops working in the country, right? The amount of training to do that under stress is just not realistic. And I think accuracy in actual real life shooting drops somewhere functionally into the mid 40%. Which, it's kind of abysmal considering, but these are trained folks, right? People who, maybe have been in a shooting before, certainly been in stressful situations, a lot of whom have, previous military experience, and that's how often we're hitting, aiming for the largest available target or center of available mass. Never mind aiming for like a kneecap or, an arm holding a weapon, right? And so, again, looking in the context of this video, you can see pretty clearly why they wouldn't be shooting for a leg, right? And they're shooting multiple times. Again, the use of force is ugly, right? And there's nothing happy or glorious about an incident like this. It's sad, it can be really depressing, but ultimately, these things happen in our society, and the public needs to understand the complexities of dealing with a situation like that, especially given kind of the level of activism that we've had in our culture around these sorts of, police interactions. And if you're going to be vociferously advocating for particular policy positions, especially when it comes to police funding which pays for things like training, maybe you should understand what the challenges actually are, right? What the realities of using force in these kinds of interactions are, and what a realistic standard of training that's going to actually be safe and effective for the officers who are going to be requested and required to respond to these sorts of incidents are going to be. At least that's my take on the subject, but let me know what you think, right? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have another perspective on it? You want to hear my silly opinion on it? Let me know. Feel free to drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe if you have an account. Feel free to share the video around, get more people involved in the conversation if you so choose. It's been fun, inspiring, and uplifting as always. We'll see you on the next one.